of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, please take notice that decisions of the Sports Authority Board may be appealed to the Chancery Court of Davidson County for review under a common law writ of certiorari. Any appeal must be filed within 60 days after entry of the final decision by the Board. Any person or other entity considering an appeal should consult with an attorney to ensure that time and procedural requirements are met.
Thank you, Teresa. I want to ask for approval of the minutes for January 12th meeting, or any comments, any corrections, additions. You have them in your packet.
I'll move adoption.
Move second to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved. I'd like to just not try to introduce everyone in the room, but pleased to announce that we have with us today Saul Solomon, who is Metro Legal Director, and over here behind some of you, next to the wall. Welcome, Saul, to our meeting. Also, we have a new member of our board that's been appointed by the mayor and approved by the council this morning. We are very pleased and excited about having. I want to introduce to you Emmett Wynn. Now, can we have two Emmets? I guess we can. He's a lifelong Nashvilleian, where he played high school and college sports. He also attended Tennessee State University. Emmett served our country with distinction in the U.S. Navy. He was part of an elite team of Naval Air Force personnel responsible for all phases of flight activities for the Patuxent River Naval Air Station located in St. Mary's County, Maryland, on the Chesapeake Bay near the mouth of the river. He was only discharged from the Navy and returned to Nashville. Shortly after military service, Emmett was employed by the Xerox Corporation, a premier Fortune 500 company, and he ranked 121st on the list. He retired as a manager with the Xerox Corporation after 35 years of service. Emmett then directed his time to public sector, where he joined the Metro Nashville Public Schools. He worked in transportation and logistics, making sure that our students were transported safely to and from school. He's very active in his church, Temple Baptist Church, where he is a deacon. Let's welcome Emmett Wynn to our board. I'll give you a couple minutes, whatever you want to say.
I'm not going to mess up after that.
Well, we're glad to have you with us on our board, and you'll look forward to working with a great group of people here who have a lot of responsibility and take it very seriously.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Executive Director's Report.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask that the board allow us to move an item on the agenda and bring the Bridgestone Arena report to the committee for consideration. I also want to introduce Matt Wilshire with the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, who's joined us here today. But if Sean's available, I want to shift over to the Bridgestone report.
Yeah, and Sean has a very important engagement with his daughter coming up very early in the morning, and we want to let him have his report so that he can make that engagement, which we would like to do the same if it was one of our children. So, Sean, are you behind me?
I am behind you.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the accommodation. About 18 months ago, I introduced my daughters to Emmett and JD, knowing I'd need this someday. Today's the day. And it's pancakes with Dad, so thank you. Welcome, Emmett. Look forward to working with you. A few nice things have happened since I wrote this letter last week, 10 days ago, whatever it was. If you haven't heard, Radulov's back. If you don't know who Radulov is, you should leave the room now. It's great leading up to Easter. The prodigal son has returned. At the end of the 08 season, he left to return to Russia. The KHL at the time was a booming league. It was going to compete with the NHL. A lot of big stars left, and he was our biggest, brightest star for the future, and he left. And every year, right around this time of year, is he going to come back? Is he going to come back? Last year, I couldn't believe how much hype was over whether or not he was coming back. And I just assumed maybe he was never going to come back. And to get him yesterday, a lot of rumors leading up to it. I mean, Jerry, over, the past month, since he was eliminated from his playoffs, it was rumors, is he coming? And it was kind of fun over the weekend. We had a feeling he was coming back. Actually, we knew. And the reports were he's not coming back. The Predators lose out again. So it was tremendous to be able to know it was happening. And pretty excited. You know, this really makes us a tremendous team. As I put in the letter, the moves we made at the trade deadline were probably the most dramatic moves we made this late in the year, ever. People are ranking us as the winner of the trade deadline. We became a much better playoff team with the guys that we picked up. We got a scorer, a big defenseman, man the blue line, and then very responsible center that can play both ways and win every faceoff that matters. So we're pretty excited about the playoffs. Hope you all are too. And then you get this gift, of Radulov coming. So it's exciting. Should be in the lineup tonight against Pittsburgh. What time's the game, Jared? 6 o'clock. So he'll be on our ice on Saturday. So we're really excited, very bullish from the Predator side, and obviously we know the effect that has on Bridgestone Arena. So the other thing that happened yesterday was a pretty good day in Smashville yesterday. The ACM, or Academy of Country Music, awarded Bridgestone Arena as Venue of the Year for the second year in a row, which is tremendous. A lot of things go into that, how tours are treated when they come, the type of grosses we put on, in the end, how did our fans like, the building. So that's really nice. So congratulations to everyone on that. I'd also like to introduce, I think I foreshadowed and said we'd have an industry icon replace Rock Jones as booking our building. And he might not be iconic yet to all of you, but he will be. But David Kells, who was our director of marketing, our senior director of marketing. Prior to that, he ran the marketing for Bridgestone Arena. Prior to that, he ran our overnight crew on the conversions operation side. Prior to that, he was a promoter, worked with different tours. He's been doing this, I think, since he's been about 8 years old, but all through college, he's been in this industry. So we're really excited for his promotion. And you see the work that he's already done in a short period of time. The future is very bright for where we are. Briefly on where we are, year-to-date, sent the financials last week. We're pacing just under the budget year-to-date, against last year's sales, slightly behind the budget year-to-date. Again, that's more of a pacing issue. If you remember last year, we had 9 Garth Brooks shows fall in December. So year over year, it's real tough to track to that. But we have a great spring planned, and it's more of a pacing issue. We'll end up catching up. I think we'll end up beating last year's results and striving to hit that budget. I'm pretty aggressive that's out there. If you have any questions about financials, I'd love to answer them. But since we last met, January and February, we're filled with some incredible shows for us. Year over year, we've increased attendance for virtually every show that we did. Jason Aldean, that we hosted in February, was the largest show we've ever done in Bridgestone Arena from an attendance standpoint. They left pretty happy. Monster Jam and Drake were I think first and second largest grossing shows on their tour. When we booked those shows, we figured they'd both be 8, 9, 10,000, wherever it may be, and then to blow it out and double the sales for Drake over Miami, beat everyone else by 10, 20%. It really shows what the continuation of what we've tried to build over the past few years and where we have the capabilities of going. Again, I always say, why do we brag about this? Because the better and bigger we appear because of our real results of outselling other buildings, outpacing other buildings, will allow us to continue to get the biggest shows that are out there. And it's an important thing. It's an industry that doesn't believe success until it's there over and over and over again. And we're starting to live into the results that are there. This past month, obviously, we hosted the Women's SEC Basketball Championship, which was a tremendous event. It's a bear of an event for the building. It's every day that you run through it, long, long days. But again, we put on a great show, and it was an absolutely tremendous tournament. And not that I'm biased towards any team, as Michelle Kennedy knows, as a Vanderbilt alum, I wear black and gold as my adopted school, but it was good to see Tennessee on the floor for that final game for a lot of reasons. We just hosted the NCAA men's second and third round. It really is the first and second. We'll call it the second and third round, and it was just tremendous. Again, not that you plan on what teams you're going to get. You get what you're given. It would have been nice to have a few of our local teams, playing in our building. We didn't, but in the end, we had the most exciting games, and again, a really nice showing for the NCAA. And we're sitting in a really nice position to continue this great run we're on with them as a partner. In the middle of all this, we had a Big Time Rush and Winter Jam, 2 sold-out shows, a handful of sold-out Predator games. We just broke the record for sold-out games in a season at 21. We'll end up at about 25 for the year, and that's before the playoffs. So all things are aligned really nicely for really continued success and improvement year over year from a financial standpoint. So we're in real nice shape. Some great shows coming up. We got Wrestling Sunday with some tickets available if you want to come. All for the Hall, which is just a great event. I think it's our 3rd year doing it. Is sold out or will be sold out. Van Halen, which will be sold out. Marathon show, which complements the Music City Marathon, Eric Church, Godsmack, which I know you're all excited about, Miranda Lambert, Sir, Roger Waters, James Taylor, Rod Stewart, Kiss, Motley Crue, a few shows that aren't announced yet, but will be, 4 or 5 pretty big shows. So we've never had this many shows on sale at the same time or pending on sale. So things are really, really good for us. What I also gave out was kind of the high points of our economic impact study that we talked about conducting probably in October or November. I think a few members of the board suggested we do go forward with this. As I said, I introduced Bob Lieb from Lieb Advisors. I don't know the name of the group. It's Bob Lieb. Last meeting, probably whenever that was, December. And I said the one great thing about Bob is he'll do very thorough work, but who knows when it's going to be done. The original engagement was, I think, 30 days or 45 days. And Bob basically lived here for about 90 days. The report's probably 3, 4, 5 days away from being finalized with every T crossed, every I dotted. But we did lift off a few high points. I thought it was important for this meeting to get it done. Steve North said in our last meeting, we should really talk about the good news that we have and let people know what's happening at 501 Broadway and the effect it has on Middle Tennessee. And that's what we put together. So it's here for, well, it turns out for your enjoyment. We all know that with our activity, good things happen. On Broadway, throughout the community. Sometimes it's lost on how good it is on every front. And that's what, fortunately, the economic impact study is going to show in great detail. The report itself is, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 pages, with most of the report dedicated to the methodology of how these numbers came about. What's nice about the work that he did, and the reason it took so long, is he had an opportunity to work with Metro Finance, state divisions, understanding where every tax dollar that was generated, where it would go, work very closely with Downtown Partnership, the Chamber, the CVB, to really understand what it meant when we do a show, who's buying tickets, where are they coming from, and how does that ripple through the community. In the end, and I said this really early when I got here, we would never do an economic impact report. And the reason is, you can read something that J.R. Lynn will write, and it'll say, the predators allege, or what'd you say this morning? Oh, the predators claim. And I said, no, we don't claim, but Bob Lee does claim and assert as a fact of what the generation is. But the problem really is, we know the number is going to be big when you look at the impact. And when you do these impacts, there's a lot of multipliers that are put in. There are a lot of ways to come up with what the number is. What Bob did is he approached it in 2 different manners. The first is what we generate, what are our revenues, what are our expenditures, and then taking a multiplier upon that. In every industry, when you're looking at impact, whether it's moving a new business into town, whatever it may be, you look at what the impact is, what jobs are created, for the most part. The multipliers that are used are on the low end, about 1.8 times, and on the high end, 13 times, depending on what the industry is. Tourism industry is always much, much higher in that scale. We used, I think, a 1.8 time multiplier. So we used the very minimum of what could be used. And the reason for that is, you don't want anyone to allege we're claiming anything that can be challenged. Because if you have a number that's $6 billion, you might as well throw it in the trash. So what we did is we took a very low number. And then what Bob did is, then he looked at it and said, okay, who's buying our tickets? Where are they coming from? The expenditures that we have, how much stay completely local, and how does that ramp up into it? And what he came up with was virtually the same number for the most part. So we have a $410 million annual economic impact, and that's because of what we spend, what we bring in, but more importantly, when you look at the map of where people are coming from when they buy tickets. And that's one of the highlights that are on here as well. When you look at our ticket purchases, last year we did over $1.4 million in guests that came to our building. It's a 30% increase over the 9-10 year, and a 40% increase over our baseline year before the new incentives were put in place. A 40% increase is absolutely incredible. The thing that blew me away with these numbers, though, and I wish Bob was here, and he will come back to do a full presentation, is he kept showing me where people were buying tickets from. And that's what none of us could accept. And we kept running in. I had Ticketmaster run it 3 different times for us when you look at the zip code mapping. But, where we're placed geographically, we know a lot of people come from outside of Davidson County. We know a lot of people come throughout the state. We know that some people come from outside of the state as well. What blew us away more so than anything else is almost 2/3 of our attendees come from outside of Davidson County. That makes sense to some degree. But 85% of our concert goers come from outside of Davidson County. and 40%, or almost 40% for concerts come from outside of the state. So now when you start looking at economic impact, you realize what does that mean? And that's where we work very closely with the CVB and say, okay, if someone's coming in from out of state for a weekend event, how does that play into it? And those weekend dates are important as we look at our incentives.
Sean, I just have a question about the time period, because I know in the Garth Brooks concert, there were a lot of people that came from all over the country. So are these figures for what time period?
All these figures, for the most part, are over about a 4-year
For the whole period?
Basically, it was looked at, the way we asked them to do this is, look at what was supposed to happen when the building was built, or first thought of in 1992 or 93. Look at it for the first operating year. Look at it for the first operating year of the Predators' arrival in 98. Look at it during the lockout of 04-05 season. Look at it in our last baseline year before the new incentives went into place, the 06-07 season. And then look at 07-08 through current as a
Okay.
blended mix. And, you know, the curse of Garth Brooks' 9 shows is going to lay with us for a long time. And every time I talk about numbers, people say, well, we had Garth Brooks.
Well, I just wanted to make sure it was for the longer
And that's why I
period.
want to call it out. It would have been easy to use last year as a year, you know, for everything. And when you look at the report, you know, we show the finances spread over 4 years. As individual and as the CUNY, it was a great thing that we had those Garth Brooks shows, because everything I was talking about earlier, we showed people we sell out 9 shows in, actually we sold out 11 shows, we had 2 games in there, in 6 days or whatever it was. It really gives people confidence to bring more and more shows here. Well, from a pacing budget standpoint, that's where Garth Brooks, the only time I'll say it, causes us an issue, and that's just catching up to the pacing. But again, it's a blended rate over the past 4 or 5 years since the incentives were put in place. But you look at where people are buying, where they're coming from. Across the board, 18% of our ticket buyers are coming from outside of state. We all knew that this, you know, impact would be huge back when Mayor Bredesen said, let's build an arena downtown to change the landscape of Broadway and really the entire Middle Tennessee. I don't think any of us realized those numbers would come to bear. When the new incentives were put in place by you and the mayor and the city in 07 or 08, again, intuitively, everyone knew this is a good thing that was happening. I don't think anyone realized the impact that it really had, but more importantly, the impact it could have if we continue to grow. And that's what we're enjoying now, and really the best days are ahead as far as our growth continues. You look at that 4 or 5 year incline of attendance, and we're enjoying a nice cycle. But when you go through this, it's a lot of numbers jump off. Again, we try to pick off, I think, the most impactful numbers. When you look at the jobs that are created, over 2,000 jobs created, both within our walls, but obviously outside of our walls. When you look at the growth that's really been spurred on by the original convention center, by ourselves, by the Music Hall of Fame, and then the new convention center, it just continues to mount. So we're in a really nice place, and we go through this. If you have any questions, we're available. We like to brag about it. This is something that you all should be proud of. I mean, this is the work of almost everyone in the room, except those that allege we're just claiming things. But a lot of nice things are happening right now. When you look at the full report, the other thing that we asked them to do, based on some input of other people, is what if the Predators would have won in 07, 08? What would have the effect have been without the Predators and Powers, if you will, on it? And a lot of people talk about the subsidies that we receive, or the incentives we receive, or I like to say the investment, you know, in the community. And in those 4 or 5 years, you know, since the incentives were put in place, almost $74 million of taxes have been generated. That creates a profit of about $25 million to the public sector. So whether we look at the incentives, the management fee, or the cap of the loss on the arena that is funded by the Sports Authority and or Metro, when you look at that all together and all the costs and the cost of the bonds to construct the building, there is a net profit to the public sector, and that's an important thing to look at. When it was built, no one was looking at, can we make a profit for the community? It was, we need to do this to reset the landscape of what we are. The fact that we are driving a profit is so much the better. So nothing but good things in reality. And someone asked me if this wasn't a good report, would you be sharing it? So the problem is I can't stop talking, much to the chagrin of the pancake people right now. And I said, we said we were going to have the report, so of course we'd have to issue it. But we're very fortunate that the report is tremendous. And when I say we, I really mean the community, going back to then Mayor Bredesen back in the early 90s. So if you have any questions about the report, we're here. I look forward to giving a more formal presentation on the report, ideally from Bob Lead, and then giving the report to you, a week or so in advance of that, so you can really study it, look at it, and ask some questions. Because again, these are numbers that we should be proud of, we should be bragging upon, and we shouldn't be shying from at all.
Thank you, Sean, for that very positive report. Do you have any questions today? Because we will be going through it and having a full presentation later. Anybody have any questions? Okay, great.
All right, thank you all very much. I apologize for running on.
Thank you, Sean. And we'll ask Larry, I believe, is going to, or Lauren's going to do that. Okay, Lauren's going to bring us up to date on the contract relationships.
Well, good morning, everyone. What a wonderful backdrop for this report to be able to talk about the successes that we are seeing both in the arena and with our wonderful hockey team, the Predators. I think everyone that is involved in the negotiations of a new arrangement believes that a new deal is good for both the city, the arena, and the Predators. I wanted to report to you today that the discussions that have taken place so far have been positive both in content and in tone. I'm very confident that an arrangement can be worked out, and I think everyone sitting in involved in the negotiations also is very, very confident. I think we're very close. And by close, I don't mean months. I'm talking more like days, most likely weeks. It's too soon for us to really be talking specifics because the conversations are still continuing. But when we are ready with a final set of agreements, we will call a special meeting of this group so that it can be discussed and have the appropriate Q&A. I think we're also, we learned a wonderful lesson with some of our other more complicated topics and called a special information session with the City Council. We're actually also considering that type of Q&A session to make sure that everyone understands the terms that were in existence today and the new ones that are going to be proposed. So while I don't have specifics for you today, I do want to leave you with a positive sense that we are very close. Solomon is here, and he can address any questions, I think, from the mayor's perspective, and Larry Threlkill, who is our outside counsel, can also address any questions that you all might have as well.
We still will meet our deadline.
Yes.
Right.
We still will meet our deadline. My expectation is that this will happen by the month of April.
When precisely is the deadline? When is the deadline? What date?
Isn't the deadline the end of the calendar year? April 30th was the new extension that was agreed to. And this will allow us to have, with the new deal, have better budget planning because of the due dates for budgets. So there's a lot of other side effects that would be positive.
Steve?
I would request from experience that we get the proposed agreement more than a couple of days before, so that we'll have a chance to read it. The last agreement was over 100 pages long, and we at least need the opportunity to be able to read it and ask questions.
Duly noted, and I think our plan is also to present a side-by-side chart that shows before, current, proposed, so that you can see the comparison, and also a red line version. But that doesn't negate the point that you're making, Steve, which is to make sure we have it in advance.
I have great confidence in Mr. Threlkill's ability to analyze. I still like to read the contract.
Absolutely, and you'll get a red line version also so that you can read the new contract, post-contract, with the red line
And I don't
comments.
mean to be insulting to him. I trust him implicitly. I still want to read it. I still want to read it.
We want you to read it all, Steve. Other questions?
I just wonder if we could maybe, knowing that we know the deadline, just tentatively set a date so that we can get it on our calendars and everybody can know it, and we can make sure that, you know, everybody's
towards
be
a
there, that our
specific date.
lawyer's not out of town, that we're all, you know, we can all be there. So if you would just distribute a date, we don't have to do it
That's a
right
good
now.
suggestion.
As soon as you and Larry, maybe we can talk. and-
Yes.
and set that schedule so that we can get it on your calendar very soon.
Have it on the calendars and the public notifications
Yeah.
also. Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. We appreciate you being our liaison to this project and working very diligently for us. That's great. tell you, it was a great day for the arena when we got Sean and Jeff and the other leadership there. And Sean, we commend you and the entire staff, and also the Predators for their great season that's going on. Any other questions that relate to Bridgestone Arena from any member? Okay, we'll move back up to the Executive Director's report. Emmett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have with us today Jan Seymour with the Big Brothers of Nashville organization, available to answer questions concerning her nonprofit request for waiver of the cost of use of parking at LT Field. They've met all the obligations of our civic event request, having insurance and other stipulations in place in order to indemnify the board for the use of the parking spaces. So we request that you vote yes to waive. We vote that you accept their request.
Okay, do I hear a motion that we accept their request? Motion made and second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, approved.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to point out to the board the two items that are on your desktop. One is a magazine that has an article concerning Bridgestone Arena. It's a publication that Steve Bromfield has used to promote professional sports and other sporting activities in Nashville. Also, there is a city paper excerpt of one of the favorite sons of Nashville, Cassius Clay, is propped up in that photograph by our own Coach Ed Temple. Coach told me that when he saw the photograph that he didn't recall that he looked like that 50 years ago. But we're pleased in positive approaches that Coach takes to exemplify what Nashville and Nashville sports are about. He is known worldwide, and he brings that to the forefront every day because of his contact. So congratulations, Coach. Thank you. I'd like to ask Ed Owens to come forward. We realize that we've worked with Ed, MDHA, the Mayor's Office on riverfront redevelopment. We promise the board that periodically we update you on activities at that site. And Ed, please just present as you feel necessary.
Good morning. I'm going to stand over here and punch the key, so I'll try to speak up so you can hear me, and I'll try not to block your views. I just want to give you, as Emmett pointed out, just a very short update on what's going on with the riverfront. And some of you may remember that this is the condition that we started with a few years ago on the east bank of the river. All the current activity is still on the east bank. I'll get my little pointer here, but of course the Shelby Street Bridge and the stadium and the old Brico building and the Korean War Veterans Bridge. This is the parking lot that you all contributed to the city to allow this project to occur. As you may recall, this all started by relocating certain parking spaces to a couple of other areas around the stadium campus. So you're very much a partner from the very beginning in all this. This photograph was taken just a couple of days ago. So you can see the transformation. This is now called Cumberland Park, and this is the renovation of the bridge building on the other side of the Shelby Bridge. We are just putting the final details on this park as we speak. This is just another shot. You're kind of over the stadium looking upriver. The park is about 5.5 acres. And it is specifically designed for active interpretive play by children and adults of all ages. So I'm just going to scroll through a few photographs here. This is what's called the hollow area. This is for the youngest toddlers to play in a safe environment. There are water features. This is not Opryland. This is not Nashville Shores. It's not a water park, but there are active water features in here, which will be much appreciated when we get into the summer months. Again, areas for active play now for teenagers, rope climbing, some younger than me that'll rock climb. Used native crab orchard stone wherever we could throughout the park to make this truly Nashville, Middle Tennessee. This is a picture of what we call the gantry overlook, cantilevered overlook, so you'll be able to walk out over the water and look up and down the river. And this is, of course, the old gantry that we preserved from the industrial days, the boat building days. This kind of blending of our historic heritage kind of into our park of the future. And this is how the bridge building looks today. Portions of this building are over 100 years old. It's eligible for the National Register. And if you can remember the way this building looked for many years, after the stadium was built and the operations were moved to Ashland City, it's a remarkable transformation. We've restored it to its original character in terms of all of its window sizes. There's just a tremendous amount of light that'll come into this building. This is a cantilever deck that we brought out over the riverbank. Again, the Ghost Ballet is right next door here. So the views of the downtown across the river, well, there they are. This is looking at that deck. And at night, it's just spectacular when the downtown area is all lit up, reflecting on the water. Now within the building, there's about 20,000 square feet in the building. A local development group led by Michael Barron is now responsible for doing the finished build out of the building and populating it with tenants. And there will be a restaurant group to be announced that will come in a portion of this building. And this is just the view out of the third floor of that building. And again, just the tremendous, tremendous views of the downtown area. So we look to have this building populated and active by the end of this calendar year, including the opportunities to eat and drink on the east bank of the river. And as you very well know, the opportunities are very limited on the east bank for many years to come because the stadium and all of that. So how we activate that building and get a restaurant in there is very important for the revitalization and the activation of the east bank of the river. You may recall that, or you may not, this is the current vision of the overall master plan. Korean Bridge upstream, Woodland Street downstream. These are the projects that we've just wrapped up. This plan, we just got a federal permit about 6 weeks ago. It took us 15 months to work through that federal permitting because most of the future projects in one way or another either touch the water or are so close to the water that we needed that higher level of permitting, and I'm happy to report that we finally have that in hand. So we are now ready to move to the next project. This is just one page out of the master plan which identifies how we want to activate the river long-term with special events. And you can see in the current park we have an amphitheater. We're going to move in the next project right down here, and I'll show you a picture of it, called the River Lawn. And it is intended to create yet another performance venue along the river. And what this plan shows is eventually there will be a whole series of venue opportunities along both sides of the river. So this is the current condition of the Ghost Ballet, the docks in this area immediately downstream. And this is our next project. We are already now under design with our federal permit in hand. It's called The Landing, which is essentially a refurbishment and expansion of the existing docks that are on the east bank for recreational and commercial vessels. And then the lawn. And right now, if you remember the zigzag stairs that come down, and on occasion the Music City Queen will dock down here, we will reform that and lay it back into a great lawn. And that's why it's called The Lawn, Truth in Advertising. And it is designed to allow 5,000 or 6,000 people to bring out a blanket and lay on the lawn and enjoy tremendous views of the downtown, but also there will be hookups for performance barges. So in years past, you could only hook a barge up to the West Bank or Riverfront Park. In the future, we'll have the option of putting that barge on the East Bank, and 5,000 or 6,000 people can sit there and listen to music or performance. So this is all about Music City and expanding our venue opportunities. So these two projects now, we are currently under design, out there poking holes and testing soils and all that. This is a cross-section which may be a little hard for you to read, but this is the bridge building. And here are the existing floating docks and the Ghost Ballet. And one of the prime objectives of this project is to provide ADA accessible access all the way down to the docks, which do not exist today. And of course, a new tie-up for the General Jackson and the Music City Queen on that side of the river. And this is what an artist's rendering of what it will look like at the end of the day, the refurbished docks and expansion of the dock system out in front of the Ghost Ballet. And then as you can see, the great lawn here, which also will provide opportunities for kayakers to come down and get into the river as well. Just very briefly, the design team on this next project is led by Lowson Associates, who are a long-established local landscape architectural team. And I've just listed a few of the other sub-consultants here. Those that are listed in black have prior experience with these first two projects on working on the riverfront. So we have a very informed, experienced team moving forward. The only exception is a small design team here that will address the acoustics of the barge. This is their first time out on the riverfront. And just some key milestones for you. We've already concluded some stakeholder meetings, which included your staff in the Titans. We are currently into field investigations, like I said, kind of poking holes, seeing what's underground. But the key milestones here is we hope to go out to bid at the end of this calendar year, to start construction in February, just a little less than a year from now, and have this wrapped up in the spring of 2014. And that pretty much concludes my presentation. I would like to, while I have you here as a captive audience, we have two key partners throughout this project, and they are both in the room this morning. Emmett, of course, we collaborate all the time, and he has been tremendously helpful in working through all the logistics of construction, and I want to publicly thank him for all his great support. And then the Titans, of course, Don and Walter, also tremendous amount of coordination throughout the construction of these processes, and these are very valued people from our perspective, and again, I want to thank them very much. Answer any questions I can while I'm here.
Where will the parking for the bridge building be when it's developed into a restaurant?
Yes. The parking is provided by Lot R, and that was all part of a very carefully choreographed development agreement involving the authority and the Titans and the city a few years ago. So Lot R will be, except for stadium event days, which of course are sacred, except for those stadium event days, Lot R will be available for public parking for all riverfront activities. And there are approximately 77 spaces. So all the calculations as far as parking demand taken into account, there's more than enough parking to satisfy all demands as far as the riverfront build-out. Yes, Steve?
The Shelby Bottoms Greenway.
Yes.
Doesn't it connect right into this same development?
The bikeway, which currently exists coming up Davidson Street, will directly connect into this. And long-term, looking way around the corner, as more of the riverfront redevelops, and of course, PSC Metals, is the elephant in the room right now there, but eventually as the rest of the riverfront develops and makes that connection between Shelby Park and this downtown area, then the objective is, the goal is to have a continuous riverfront connector, greenway connector, to link those two together. But in the short term, it will be the designated bikeway that will provide that linkage.
And I hate to admit that I have not lived bicycle in a number of years, and I knew that there was a connection there, but I didn't know exactly how that fit in with the rest of this development.
Yeah, there are designated bike lanes marked on Davidson Street today that provide that connection. Yes, sir.
There was a mention of receiving permits, that you just received permits, and then on your timeline you had, I believe it was November to receive other. Are there any showstoppers that are out there yet?
No. The permit that we just received is what's called a 404 national permit granted by the Corps of Engineers. And that's the big permit nationally that you have to work the waterways. There are a whole myriad of local permits that we will have to get, including our own stormwater permits and code permits and things like that. Those are the permits then that were referenced in that milestone, but those are more localized and not so difficult to obtain.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Margaret?
Helen and I were just talking about, we've both seen this property. It's fantastic.
It is.
It is so beautiful, and there's so much to do, and the views are incredible, and its design is so easy, but it's different. And I just want to commend you and your team. It is really going to be a showstopper for Nashville. It's really exciting, so thank you.
Steve?
Will there be areas for vendors
Yes.
and food vendors and that sort of thing, and picnic tables and I'm thinking of the waterfront in Toronto that has, it's like a boardwalk, and there are all sorts of hot dog vendors and food vendors and places, picnic areas and that sort of thing. And that's sort of what I envision that we're going for. And I'm just,
We share the same vision. The park, which we're just finishing up now, has what's called the Esplanade, which is just a super wide sidewalk that goes the entire length of the river bank. And along that Esplanade, it's 18 feet wide, I think, and along that Esplanade, we have electrical and water connections so that vendors during special events can actually line up along the Esplanade, whether it's food carts or whatever.
So exciting.
And there are, of course, benches and seating areas. There's a designated kind of picnic area itself within the park, which is designed for us to sit and watch the toddlers play immediately below it in the sand and all that, and to have unobstructed views from that seating picnic area of the counter to the concession stand, so you can see the soda coming out of the stand to toddlers, views of the restroom entrance, and also direct views from the glass windows of the park office. So kind of all kind of carefully choreographed and designed for this kind of constant surveillance. So anyway, I'm off on a tangent. So picnic areas in the park. And as we get into the next phase and move on downriver, we'll be looking at additional opportunities for benches and sitting. There are good opportunities today, given the configuration of Lot R and the driveway system, for food trucks. And we've always envisioned, well, food trucks really weren't on our screen 5 years ago, but they certainly are now. And there'll be excellent opportunities, subject to your consent, because it's within your parking lot, to provide opportunities even for food trucks on special occasions.
I think it's very exciting.
Section that's complete that you showed, is that open to the public?
It is Parks Department right now is in the process of scheduling the grand opening for that park. So that will be announced, not by me, but in the very near future. So that is in the works.
You know, we've seen so many cities develop along the river, and isn't it great to see what's happening here in Nashville? And Ed has been on top of this, and he's involved Walter and Emmett and others to plan it, and we commend all that are involved and look forward to its completion.
It would not have happened without your participation to set this property up, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Moving on the agenda, the next item we have is staff salary adjustments. As you know, we have two staff members, Emmett and Monica, and in checking and doing a review, they have not received the cost of living adjustments or anything for the past 5 years like most other departments of Metro have received. And I talked with the Metro Finance, and we have funds in our budget that would allow the 2.8 cost of living adjustment, which is the first in 5 years. And I think it's very appropriate that we do this for these two employees. It's kind of small if you think about it over a 5-year period, but we kind of follow the Metro plan. And I would ask you as an authority to approve this salary adjustment at the current time. It is covered in the budget. And
I have a question.
Okay.
Is there a mechanism in place to review?
I also asked for that. I thought some might ask me for that. And I have the form that's used by Metro for evaluation and the points on it. And what I thought I would do is send out to each member and let them complete it and return it, and then we can see how we can help our staff do different, if we want them to do different, or how they can do their jobs better, how they may improve and so forth. It's not a long form. I've got a copy here, and we will email those or mail them to those who prefer, whichever way you prefer, and let you return them, and then we can look at that. I think that would go beyond this we're talking about today, the 2.8, because it may be that there are other adjustments that would be needed depending on how the evaluations come back and any new guidelines we give to the staff for improvement or changes or whatever. So
Let me ask you, when is the last time they were reviewed?
I know when Arnett was chairman, there was a review done, and I don't think there's been one since.
Okay, and have we looked at their job descriptions, any, or? Just for discussion purposes,
You're right.
I thought maybe we should have a committee to look at their job descriptions and engage them about what their daily tasks are, so that we can make sure everything's aligned and we can do a thorough review of them. I don't think they've been reviewed in years.
Okay, that would be appropriate. We'd be glad to do that.
The committee might also be a good place to take the results of the surveys and compile them and use that as part of their report back to us.
Okay. It's a good suggestion.
I'd like to move that we develop a personnel committee immediately to consider the raises, and we can make it retroactive.
Yeah.
Appropriate if the committee recommends and approves, and consider the job descriptions and the required functions of each of their positions.
Okay.
A second.
Second. Discussion.
Just a question, and I don't disagree, but to what extent are the job requirements specified by Metro? To what extent do we have flexibility to adjust them?
I think we have pretty broad flexibility. It depends on the powers and duties of the board, the charter, and in the powers and duties granted to you by the Tennessee Code to manage everything.
That's good to know. Thank you.
No, go ahead, Steve.
I've just asked that the committee also take the last time that we had a review and take the surveys and the comments from the last one, compare them with the new one and see if progress has been made or see if changes have been made in accordance with the previous.
I think that's the way it's intended.
Okay.
Okay.
I believe that our bylaws call for this committee and give specifications for what they're supposed to be looking at, unless I'm not remembering correctly.
Okay.
There are some policies in place that were adopted by the board, I would say maybe 2004, that address various different kinds of business decisions and maybe some personnel issues as well. I'm afraid I didn't bring it with me today, but I can provide that.
We can provide that to the committee as they work. Okay.
Well, now, are we doing this to hold up 2.5% increase? That was my question. Are they separate?
They're separate. They're separate. They're separate. This is another motion of how we proceed for the future. Yeah. Okay. Okay, you've heard the recommendation that we activate and appoint a personnel committee, and you've heard several suggestions that the personnel committee be charged to perform. Any other discussion of that motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we have that. And we'll come back to the question on the current recommendation on the 2.8% cost of living.
How will those members be determined? Will you appoint them as a chair?
I'll be glad to, and if anybody wants to ask to serve, if they'll see me after the meeting, I'll be glad to consider that, if that's okay. Okay.
I move approval of the 2.8% cost of living adjustment.
I said,
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Approved. Okay, we're going to the item D, change of parking vendor. Teresa, are you doing that, or Emmett, are you presenting it?
Chairman, let me offer some background comments on
Okay.
parking as Teresa's getting ready to talk to you about our request before the board. You realize that some years ago, one of our tenants, CMA at LP Field, indicated to me in a private discussion their concerns about parking and record keeping as it related to some receipts there. I worked with Walter Overton at LP Field at that point to initiate a broader look at parking as it related to that specific tenant. We instituted a review of the revenue collection process, and our tenant was indeed happy with that change. The Sports Authority, in my discussions with the chairman, then went to internal audit at Metro to ask that we received an audit by a third-party organization, Metro Audit in this case, to look at revenue collections for parking. They returned the findings that we shared with the board. The board instructed us to then go through a procurement process. We used the input from the findings, input from community leaders, to build a contract that we thought would let the board see that the changes that were appropriate had been made. Helen Walker represented the board on the selection committee for review of the request for proposal. There are a number of national firms and local firms that applied. The committee looked very discreetly at each one of those applications and made a recommendation. The recommendation followed the procurement practices of Metro government. From that point, it involved Metro Finance as far as financial capability was concerned. It added the innovations that the board wanted, which was an enhanced marketing plan, focus on better utilization of the existing spaces that are there. One of the unique requirements and requests was for a guaranteed financial revenue to the board, to the Sports Authority. You know that all those funds are used to pay off the bond indebtedness for that building. We are also interested in implementation of a customer satisfaction survey so that we can see how well we're doing as far as people that come to the many activities at the arena. It gives us another check and balance kind of activity so that we can say to our professional operators, these are the things that the board wants to see. That brings us to today. What we have done is circulated the contract. That material is in your packet. We're asking for those items to be placed in the contract that I indicated to you. A guaranteed net revenue to the board annually, enhanced financial reporting that's open and transparent, more timely reporting. We also ask that the parking contractor provide the board with its own, the parking contractor's expense, they will pay for an annual audit of the revenue there. So we think that we have a really attractive proposal to put before the board today. Teresa, are you ready to talk us from this point forward what we're asking the board to do?
Sure. In reviewing the contract, just came across a few points that we thought could maybe be more clarified with the vendor in terms of what Sports Authority's expectations and needs are. And so have been working with Metro Purchasing to try to maybe just amend a few things. And in that process, what we proposed to suggest, since this is something that the board has been eager to see in place for some time now to avoid any further delays, we would propose that the board go ahead and approve the execution of the contract with the vendor, and subject to the ability to make those few edits and maybe delegate to the chair or an appropriate member the ability to review the final version and execute that version. There is one other aspect of the situation which involves the existing arrangement, I guess, with the current vendor, which actually is a contract that goes back to 2006 and is technically in an expired status. However, of course, the dealing of the parties has been to continue as though that contract were in place. Given that, we think we should kind of continue to honor its technical terms despite the passage of the expiration date, and it provides for a 30-day termination notice to the vendor. One thing that does concern me is that you don't want to have a gap, because these vendors, in addition to providing management services, which is of course very critical, they also provide insurance and indemnity. So we do not want there to be a gap between the situation with the current vendor and the new vendor that's proposed to take over under this agreement. So we want to make sure that the Sports Authority, because these are Metro purchasing contracts, the primary contact is probably the Metro purchasing agent, but since the Sports Authority is kind of the department that's being served, you would probably give the purchasing agent some comfort level if you indicated that you wanted him to go ahead and send the termination letter and then see if we can kind of coordinate the timing so that there is not that gap in terms of the effective date of the new agreement.
Okay. Helen, do you want to make some comments? You work.
I would love to.
Okay.
I think you all are going to be, members of the board and everybody in Nashville is going to be so pleased and when this new system that the company that has been selected puts into effect. We looked for many minutes and hours at plans from people from all over the country. And Stewart Transportation not only told in their contract what they were going to do, which they all did. We're going to make parking better. They told you how they were going to do it. And coming from a background of being in transportation for years, they actually can do what they said they were going to do. I mean, it is a doable plan and will be so much better for everybody involved. I think it was well worth the time and effort it took, and I think we've come up with a partnership with a company that's going to do a really, really good job. Another thing that I believe they will be doing, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that I think will please the board is we will have monthly revenue reports that will be on time, and they will have a representative, unless we don't want them to, at each of our meetings in case when the report is looked at, or if you've had problems parking during the month or whatever, there will be a representative here at our board meetings for the board to ask any concerns, address any concerns or questions that you have. And I don't think we've had the luxury of that before. So I think you're going to be real happy with the results of this contract.
Thank you, Helen, for your work with it. Emmett?
I did want to echo what Helen said and indicate to the board members that are new to Helen to indicate that she has retired from the transportation industry and has years of experience in exactly what we're trying to accomplish. Her insight was invaluable to us in our deliberations, in that she knew exactly what we were trying to accomplish. I thank you for your input.
Helen, would you like to make a motion then relative to what Teresa said, that we approve the contract subject to some of these cleanup changes that need to be made? Second. Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I recuse myself because we've represented the company selected.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Ask a question, are we authorizing Ms. Costonas to negotiate in our behalf to make these changes that she thinks are appropriate, and if, are we approving it whether those changes get made or not, or are we approving it only if she is satisfied that her concerns have been taken care of? I'm not.
I would think that we could, this is something we've delegated Helen to do along the way, that we can let the two of them coordinate, and when Helen feels that it's appropriate, that she could, on our behalf, go ahead and affect the contract. And the notice could be given to the present parking for termination and that kind of thing.
In other words, what we're voting to do is that if both Ms. Walker and Ms. Costonas are satisfied that this is the best thing to do, that they are hereby authorized to do it.
Right. Exactly. Is that okay with you, Helen?
Yes.
Okay. And of course, Emmett will be with them too, as our,
Mr. Chairman,
Emmett will be involved in that too.
Mr. Chairman, I think technically the request is that after they indicate to you that you sign on behalf of the board, I think it's.
Well, after they negotiate, yeah.
After they negotiate,
Right.
technically the chair signs.
Yeah, I will, that'd be great. Okay, all in favor of the recommendation, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Emmett?
But, Mr. Chairman, one other thing, Ms. Costonas called my attention, that we want to be sure that this motion included the authorization to send the termination.
Yes, I stated that, yeah.
I'm not sure that was absolutely clear, so.
Right, that is a part of the motion, that's right. Okay, Emmett, any other?
Mr. Chairman, Walter, if you would allow me to introduce the water service portion of your report. Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to note to the board that there are pumps located at the LP field that are large mechanical devices that are water handling devices. We have with us the contract service through Metro Water Service. Jim Target is here as a Metro Water Service representative. That's who the Metro Sports Authority turns to as it relates to the maintenance of the pumps. The pumps are the responsibility of the board of the authority. Those large pumps have been in the stadium since the beginning. They are years old. Through very good engineering work and maintenance work, the pumps have outlived their life cycle. The report that's in the materials before the board today is two-pronged. The report that we're bringing to you today is important because as we get to the rainy season, those of us that work at LP Field during the flood are very aware of how devastating water can be in the wrong place at the stadium. Metro Water Service said to us that it's important that we make the mechanical changes to the pumps now rather than later. There is a larger issue that we're putting before the board today, not asking for a vote. That's option 2 that talks about replacement of those pumps. That's a multi-$1,000 impact for the board. Today's request is for $58,000 for mechanical work that needs to be done now. It will come through a capital expense budget. The funds have been identified and they are available. So we're asking the board's indulgence. Jim, would you like to speak to the board at this time and just give some other background?
Well, I guess the reason Water Services is concerned is because we're operating this on behalf of the Titans organization. And we know right now that I just asked our people to give me an assessment. 4 out of the 6 pumps would not start tomorrow if we had to turn them on. And we want to make sure that this facility is up to our standard operationally, because like I said, we are getting ready to move into what we call the wet season, and we do not want to be sitting there trying to put equipment together on the fly in an emergency. And so we would definitely encourage the board to consider alternative 1 today, and we can sit down and negotiate alternative 2 at a later time. We'll be glad to work with both organizations to make that happen. Any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Mr. Chairman, also Scott Rayson is available to speak to the board at this time. This Scott.
Come up with Mr. Tarleton. I'm Scott Rayson of Walter Lanston, here on behalf of the Titans. And I would like to talk with you, when we do it right this second, about option 1 versus option 2. Option 1, I believe, is maintenance of the existing ship homes. Option 2 would be to replace the existing homes.
Want to be rebuild the whole station. What option 2 consists of?
All right, and the first option would cost roughly
50 sometime.
58, and option 2 is about
600.
Okay. But I just would like to talk to you about what.
So the difference between the 58 and the 600.
I think this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Especially since he doesn't seem.
On the financial side of this, the question really is this a cost that comes from the capital fund, or is this a cost that is borne by Metro outside of the capital fund? When the stadium was first being designed, we signed the stadium lease and the development agreement with really 0 plans, specs, preliminary plans, specs, and had all sorts of provisions about how the stadium would be designed. When we got our first set of plans and specs, everybody then for the first time realized just how far down in the ground HOK, the architectural group, was planning on going. And we began to realize it's a whole lot cheaper to dig a hole than to build concrete walls. But we also realized for the first time that the bottom of the stadium would be below the level of the Cumberland River. So there are provisions that were added to the lease about dewatering facilities. And the dewatering facilities with operational and capital costs would be the responsibility of the Sports Authority. And simultaneously with the approval of that amendment, there was an amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the Sports Authority and Metro, under which Metro agreed it would incur those costs, it would take on those responsibilities. Same agreement in which Metro agreed that it would take on the responsibility for maintaining all the green areas out in the parking space. So, but as to these pumps, we had hoped that we would talk with the administration because I think it's an economic matter. This really is with the intergovernmental agreement. This is a matter between Cumberland Stadium and Metro. We weren't able to do that in large part because this is the first thing we did. Child in the hospital for 2 weeks. So anyway, I think we're all in agreement that we need to proceed with whether it's Project 1 or Project 2.
There's some negotiation.
We acknowledge that if the resolution on who's responsible for this economically is that this comes out of the capital fund, then this comes out of the capital fund. But if the resolution is that Metro is responsible for part of, separate apart from that, then that's the way we go.
Will the
The chair needs.
Go ahead.
Will the expenditure require council approval?
Well, it may have to be authorized by budget, but Metro has already agreed to an intergovernmental agreement that it is responsible for the cost. So I don't know enough about what the council approval would be required. But, if this is something that needs to be funded pending Metro's reimbursement of the cost, obviously that's the way we've operated for years, where we bank the expenses and reimburse.
Steve?
See if I understand the issue.
Yeah.
The thing that everybody agrees on is that we have to dewater, and that's a new term for me, by the way. I'm going to tell my children, grandchildren, dewater the bathtub rather than pulling the plug. But we all agree that the stadium, there has to be provision for adequate dewatering, otherwise we're playing ball in the water. The issue is whether initially
Thank you.
independently, basically, the sports authority agreed to fund and provide for dewatering? Or is this something under our agreement with the Titans and the Cumberland, that the sports authority through the capital fund and the seat tax and all of that would have to vote? That's the issue that we're facing.
That's correct.
So someone needs to decide. And since both Metro and the sports authority are represented by the same law, and since all our money comes to Metro, we need to get the legal part to make a decision. Is this a capital expense that comes out of the capital fund, or is it something that comes out of the general fund of Metro, which gets into all sorts of political, in the good sense of the word, decisions that really elected officials need to make as to whether this is a direct taxpayer expense or whether this is an expense that comes out of seat tax, user fees, and that sort of thing. Am I making sense on that?
Yeah, and Steve, I think Teresa has done some research on this and may have some comments relative to this.
I think what Mr. Braceman said is fairly accurate representation. However, I'm not in a position to make the determination that Mr. North is talking about at this point in time. So, and part of my own dilemma, I suppose, just for full disclosure purposes, is I do represent both Sports Authority and Metro, and y'all are both parties to the intergovernmental agreement. And the Water Department in particular is also a client agency that I advise, for example. I just do feel that there are opportunities here for the work that needs to be done and the financing of that to be further discussed. And that those discussions probably need to happen, including people that are not here today. And so I just don't have the ability to make any kind of representations as to what Metro can and can't do right at this point in time. So I do think it is clear that the work needs to be done, that that the rainy season is imminent.
Ralph has a question.
Quick question. Regardless of what we decide about the replacement and rebuilding, the $50,000, the $58,000 in immediate work needs to be done regardless. Would that be correct?
That would be my recommendation at a minimum,
Yeah.
and as soon as possible, because we need authorization, because this is such a large amount of money, the way we've been working
Yeah.
with the Titans.
And Emmett, if I understood it correctly, that amount of money is available and in the budget, and if we approved it today, that work would go ahead. Is that right?
Well, what we're asking, yes, what we're asking the board to do is to approve for us to resolve the issues that the lawyers are talking about as relates to what pocket the money comes out of, what bucket it comes out of. We'd like the authorization to fund this project, and then we'll find the money.
But by this project, you mean the whole thing?
We have option one. We'll come back to you with option two at a later date after some of the thorny issues. But the imperative is that Metro Water Services said to the Metro Sports Authority that we're approaching the rainy day season, and they need authorization to maintain those pumps. And that's what the staff request is that you authorize us to find the money for option one.
I'm still not clear that this is our responsibility as opposed to, I don't, whether it's a maintenance or whether it's the other issue. And I don't know that I'm real comfortable with doing that till somebody says, yes, it's our, we're supposed to be guardians of public money, and just to spend it without any kind of clarity on who's responsible for the ultimate paying, but I don't want to flood the whole place either, so.
Steve?
I want to clarify something. We've got option one and option two. Is your recommendation for the water department, is it either or is it both and?
Either or as far as we're concerned, but we just operate the facility, and all we want to have is whenever an event occurs, we want to know and be able to tell the community everything we can pump to the maximum design capacity of that facility.
But I think you're a part of my concern. If we spend $50,000 of our capital fund to make these maintenance improvements, and then next month it turns out that we want to spend $500,000 for new pumps, have we wasted that $50,000?
That was the question I was just asked. We can work it if it happens quick enough so that it would not, that we would integrate the 50,000 into the 600 so that you would not lose the value of that.
And if the 600 is decided on by the power that the Metro, independent from the obligations of the Sports Authority, then that $50,000, $60,000 that we are being asked to authorize today for maintenance, will we get that credited back so we can spend it on other?
It's all about timing. I know what you're asking, and if we can do it soon enough that we can integrate in, so you're talking about rebuilding motors, or you're talking about replacing motors? You're talking about putting in new switch gear. You design it such that the new switch gear will work with the new equipment, then you get the value out of that. So it's all about how fast we move to integrate the ultimate project into the current project to make the equipment.
And the only way that we can affect that, the rapidity of that decision-making process is to approve the maintenance money, option one, and then wait to see if you guys can work it out so that we haven't wasted that money.
Yeah, and we'll expedite it as to whatever we need. Our involvement will be with giving technical input into the process.
Nancy?
I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, but I'm just curious as to why this is coming to us in the form of what appears to be an emergency authorization request. How long have you known that the 4 pumps will no longer work?
We wrote our letter in August of 2011.
And you wrote the letter to
to the Titans organization, who we have a maintenance contract with.
And did you follow up with sports authority?
Anybody that talked to us, we followed up.
Don wants to respond to that.
Nancy, we have had dialogue with Rich Regan all the way through on this process, so I don't want you to think we haven't been interfacing with Metro, because we have.
But why now? I agree, go ahead.
Then what happens if we authorize you to, since it's federal money and they have to go through a number of discussions to determine what funding is available? It sounds like if the more efficient avenue may be replacement. If we authorize both options subject to Metro's determination about funding availability, would that work? Would that work, someone answer?
In one instance, it may not be the same. It may not all be Metro money because it is Sports Authority money developed by user fees, seat tax, and that sort of thing, as opposed to general fund money that is developed by general property tax. And that could be a very important issue with the budgeting process that is active right now. Am I wrong about that?
Go ahead,
If I could.
Scott.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it is Cumberland Stadium Inc.'s preference to go with option 2, which would be to replace the pumps, which we think for rebuilding, which we think is over the long haul, the more economic solution. So if this is going to wind up being a capital fund, then we think that we should be able to make that decision. If this is something that has to be paid out by Metro without impact on the capital fund, and Metro wants to spend $58,000 and have to, you would probably be incurring more cost over, say, the next 10 years going down that path than if you replace the funds. If it's a Metro decision, then Metro can make that decision. But our intent is to get this resolved very, very soon, so that Metro Water knows what it has to do.
Ref has been in.
Back to Helen's question. I mean, is this our responsibility? Is this entirely on us or not?
By us, you mean Sports Authority?
Sports Authority.
Versus, as between Sports Authority and the Titans, Cumberland Stadium Inc., an amendment to the lease makes it clear that in that context, as between those two parties, it's Sports Authority's obligation.
Okay.
The intergovernmental agreement is between Sports Authority and the Metropolitan Government. And I think that Scott has correctly explained that has a parallel provision in it, or appears to me to be a parallel provision in it. Like I said, I'm in an awkward position because
I understand. I just want to understand because I'm not a lawyer.
Any direction from Metro as to their interpretation of that.
So just so I'm clear, I mean, it is our responsibility, and how this gets paid for is a matter of discussion between us and Metro government.
I think that is essentially correct.
Okay, and then one last question, gentleman from Metro Water. These pumps, they're original equipment when the stadium was built, pretty much?
My knowledge, they were.
What is the typical useful life of that piece of equipment?
It's usually less than, well, it's borderline, it's right there, right now. It's about 12 years, 12 to 15 years is usually the effective life.
And we're about that time.
Lauren, do you have a question?
Do we have a recommendation on this topic from Metro?
Do we?
Right. If I could, sir, that's the conversation that we were going to have in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that we will try to have within the next 4
So given all these variables, what's
Yep.
the best step, Emmett?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that the board approve option A, and that the other issues that have been indicated today will be solved on their own. We will bring those solving of those questions back to the board before any action would be taken. The critical thing, your point, Ralph, is those pumps have not, those pumps have had problems over the 10 years. It's not as though this is the first time, that they've worked perfectly for 10 years. We brought an authority here that is timid about telling you that it's imminent that the pumps are going to fail. Those are my words, not yours. The Titans and others are aware of the fact that the maintenance work needs to be done now, regardless of those other issues that have been raised being done. So again, the staff's recommendation is that the board allow us to move forward on the maintenance issue. That will allow the water services to do what they need to do unencumbered. So, Ralph.
Okay, Margaret, did you have
option one, please?
question?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, Ralph?
Thank you.
But just as a suggestion, 'cause I mean, I think all of us, we don't want to spend money and then spend more money to undo the money that we've spent. And it seems to me if these are at the end of their useful life, sometime soon we're going to need to replace them anyway. If we were to say, for example, we approve the replacement of these pumps, but if there's no decision on how that gets paid for by a date certain, then we fix them up so that we are assured of working pumps while option 2 gets worked out. I mean, I'll just throw that out for discussion, see what y'all think.
Since we don't have a recommendation from the Department of Finance, I would recommend that we delegate the authority to do either option A, option B, or both to you, Ralph, subject to in discussions with Metro Finance, after following the recommendation of Metro Finance. That way, we can authorize you to agree to one or both as you deem appropriate. Is that okay to you?
Steve, you have a comment?
Yeah, I would go and recommend that we follow the recommendation of the staff and approve option A. That takes care of the emergency, and that because of the way our agreements are written, even though it is maintenance, it comes out of the capital fund, and we know that we've got the money to pay for it. And then if the determination is made that there is money available for option B or option 2, then they can come back to us and let's look at it. I hesitate to just say, you guys do whatever you want to do and we approve it in advance. I'm not sure that's good business.
Is that a motion I can second?
That is a motion.
Yeah, and I'll second the motion. I'll second that motion.
I would like some discussion. With all due respect, I don't believe that, I don't believe Emmett's recommendation is based upon any analysis or determinations of the legal issues or the finance issues that we've been discussing today. And I believe after Metro Finance is able to determine and consult with the legal department, they can come back with a thoughtful recommendation and provide that to Ralph Perry. We delegate him the authority to consummate an agreement. And that's why I did not agree with Emmett's recommendation, because I don't think he has a basis to make it.
Well, yes, let me suggest, I think we can get to what you're suggesting too, since this would naturally be the kind of thing that falls to your capital fund committee anyway. This Steve's motion puts us on record, agreeing to something to get that fixed at a minimum. Now, ideally, in my discussions then with Metro Finance, we clear up the larger issues around item 2, because I think it would be better if we got that cleared up and proceeded right to what needs to happen at some point. eventually. And, it would be my intention to bring that recommendation back to you quickly enough that we don't have to do one, but it does put us on record doing one so that we don't enter the rainy season with no plan to get the water out of the stadium or the water license.
And Ref is our liaison to the Titans, say that for him especially, so that we... You've heard the motion, further discussion.
Well, there are
I
two
guess I'm trying to split the
motions.
baby.
Yeah, there are two motions
No.
on the table.
I don't know if we ever had a second to your motion, did we?
I think we did. No one seconded my motion?
I don't believe so. I didn't hear
Did you make a
it.
motion?
I didn't hear
I don't
it.
think you did. I think you said it would be my recommendation that I would do.
Okay, you've heard the motion made and second, further discussion.
Well, I just want to make sure I understand what the motion is, okay? Because Ralph just said that he thought Steve's motion would answer Nancy's concern. So I want to make sure I understand the motion.
Would you restate your motion, Steve?
I mean, you didn't quite say it that way,
My
but
motion is very simple.
I want to just make sure I
At
understand.
this point, we approve option one. That's it.
Okay. And the second was made to that motion by Helen. Further discussion.
And
You've heard the intent that...
yeah, and it would be my intent to try to fast track those further discussions on option 2, and as quickly as is practical, as quickly as we can get an answer, bring that further recommendation back to you, and hopefully in time that we could, if the determination is to do option 2, to do that so that we don't waste any money on option 1.
Are you all right with that being an amendment to your motion?
Here's the problem. Ralph is talking about entering into negotiations with the finance department at a time when the question of a property tax increase is very much on the mind of everybody in Metro. I think that we ought to
Well, let me just say, he didn't say that he was going to do anything. He said he was going to attempt to do that. And not that anything was even going to come back to us. But I think it's important, here's just my concern. I think it's important that we have a bigger picture than just that we have a plan, a bigger picture than just we approve this, given the discussion today. So he just said he's going to go off and he's going to try to bring this back to the board, with the big picture. And that's kind of what I heard. And I'm comfortable that we have something else ongoing in addition to just approving item 1.
I'm happy that to happen, but I don't want to approve it in advance. I want to come back.
No, he said bring it back.
This is, Steve, what I envisioned, this is
Yeah,
in the
that's not what I'm
context of
thinking.
the normal working discussions that I have periodically, because you all have asked and appointed me to keep an eye on capital fund expenditures.
I don't think we need a specific motion to do that. I think that's something.
Yeah, I would agree.
That you would do regardless.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we let the minutes reflect that this is the procedure we'll follow?
Okay.
Let's vote on the motion and let the minutes reflect what has been said by Ralph. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And we'll move now to Walter. I don't think we ever had you this late on the agenda. We're not trying to send you a message or anything.
Mr. Chair, and members, let's talk about something that's fun. Now that we have everybody's attention.
After you get it.
We are getting ready for 3 double hitters at the stadium soccer match, okay?
Y'all would give attention to Walter, please.
I'm going to be brief too, but I've got to go to work.
Real work.
Real work, that's real work.
No, this is real work.
That's right. We're having the 2012 Olympic under 23 That's right, serious.
Soccer,
It's starting tonight.
Tonight.
Now, if any of y'all have any rain powers, please use them. We love to play with that tonight. We're having 3 doubleheader. First will be tonight. USA will be playing Cuba in the last match. Should be some exciting soccer matches that will certainly determine who will go to London 2012 Olympics. I trust that all of y'all did receive one of these.
We got it.
One of these items, right?
We got it.
As always, we always furnish an LP Field calendar. Some of the events I do want to point out in a hurry will be the CMA Marathon will be on April 28th. We also will have the Mayor's Field Day, which will be on May 5th, which is an interactive Children's Day. That the mayor is sponsoring some health fair. They'll have grids on the field. They'll also have different interactive type challenges for family members. They are expecting over 5,000 children and their families. We've been meeting with the mayor's staff for the past 3 weeks. Looks like it's all coming together, and we expect them to have a fun time. I think a website has been put up. The mayor made an announcement last week at Wright Middle School, so we're excited about hosting that event at LP Field. Also, I do want to mention that Emmett and I worked on, for the last year, I guess, they're starting this month to have electric car charging stations and Lot E. That work should start this month. Hoping that will be utilized a lot, but we'll see. All right, let's go to tab 2, which is LP Field casualty loss. It's been a long time since I have actually stood up here and talked about where there's no balance. No balance on casualty loss. Rachel Nolan, the Metro Insurance is terrific to work with. When I do submit claims, she works on them. For the first time I can remember in years. There's nothing over. Tab 3 is the C user fee fund, which is just under $3.5 million. Moving to tab 4 is the capital fund balance, which is a little over $1,143,000. Some of our discussion points in capital reimbursement information you see on tab 5. If you look through your package, you'll see those invoices and reimbursement requests have not been filed. We have had discussion in meetings about some reimbursements, but I think that will be taken up in our next meeting. And we talked about the stormwater pump update, and do you have any questions at all?
Anybody have any questions for Walter?
How is the construction coming along? You know, the 28 million.
It's coming along just fine. You know what we do, Coach? I'm going to defer that to Mr. Don. Don wants to talk about that.
I have 2 things to bring the board up to date. One, events. I've been talking with Ken, who's the liaison there. We have Western Kentucky and Kentucky is confirmed for Labor Day weekend in 2013. So we're working on the date there. We also are actively working on events in 2013, but also beyond 2013. So very exciting events that we're trying to incorporate the CBP and Metro government. We've had a lot of good discussions ongoing there. So as we try to get more events, and we will get more events, we're already focused on 2013. Our organization is really emphasizing events more so than we have in the past for obvious reasons. Second, to Coach's point, we have worked hand in hand with stayed in touch with Ralph in terms of the bid process, which took a very long, I mean, it was an excruciating long negotiation with all the bidders. And Rich couldn't be here today, but we will have a meeting moving forward in terms of what we're doing. A lot of the renovations are going to start in full right after soccer, so right around the 1st of April. And we have stayed, Coach, within the financial parameters that were established with the meetings that we had with the Sports Authority and Metro Council. So we will have a future meeting, whether we do it, Chairman Elliott, in April or in May. We will lay everything out for you. Rich has seen it all and is very comfortable with it. And we're working on a presentation for the entire Sports Authority board. But everything's moving along as we said we would in the last meeting, where it was blessed both by the Sports Authority and Metro Council to stay within the financial parameters. And I think Ralph knows where we've been going, and we're right there. We're right on top of it.
Okay, any other questions there? Okay, Walter, anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Everybody have a great day.
The last item on...
One question for Walter. Who's going to be our starting quarterback?
I'm coming out of retirement.
Okay, our last item on the agenda is the XM radio agreement. Teresa, are you presenting this?
Mr. Chairman, by way of background, as Teresa's pulling out her legal XM Radio has been a good tenant in the building for a number of years now. What is extraordinarily positive about our relationship with XM is that after big events, the stars and others are able to walk up into the tower and engage in a satellite discussion that goes around the world that is used in branding Nashville as Music City. I've talked to operations staff here in the building, other community leaders, and asked them what their appraisal assessment was of XM, and it's been exemplary. We're proud to have them. They bring a lot of good positives to our building activity, so we support their continuation of their contract with Metro Sports Authority. Teresa?
The lease agreement with XM Satellite Radio Inc. Provides in terms of term, it was initially dated August 1st, 2007, maybe August 17th, but at any rate, it expires as of August 31st, 2012, and it allows for an additional renewal term of 5 years. It says, tenant may, with landlord's written consent, extend this lease after the initial term for one additional 5-year term, first renewal term, commencing on September 1, 2012, and terminating on August 31, 2017. So I think Mr. Edwards received a letter from Dana F. Altman, a Sirius XM radio representative, who requested in this letter that if agreeable, the Sports Authority and Sirius XM shall renew the lease for an additional term of 5 years from September 1, 2012 through August 31, 2017. We consent to the renewal of the lease agreement for the first renewal term as set forth in the lease agreement. Please sign this letter of agreement below and return it to my attention. And provide a counter signature for the board chair. The chair could, of course, only do that with the board's approval. There is a rent provision in the lease agreement as well that provides during the first year of the term. I'm sorry.
I've got it.
Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. The rent is an escalating rent that is in line with the rents that are paid for commercial office space in downtown Nashville. The tenant is agreeable to it. It's got an escalator in it that's 1.05% that takes care of increase in rent paid by other like facilities. The lessee, Sirius XM, has put in improvements with the board's support, hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment in a specially designed radio studio that is on the second floor of the building. We think that they've met all their obligations to us. That was a promise that they made to us, a promise that they kept. We support this continuation of the agreement.
Okay, Ralph had a question, I believe.
No, I'm fine.
You fine, and then
What class facility are there lease payments in line with?
It's class, there is not a class for it. We aligned it with a survey done by the building manager using one of the real estate companies to do that survey. It may be B class or A class.
Is that a 2006, 2007 survey you're talking about?
This survey was done last year by Sean Henry and his group.
So the survey for the lease payments that were inserted into this 2007 agreement was conducted last year?
The survey was done to see if the lease payments that they're currently paying are in line with downtown property, and they did, Sean and Company did a recent survey to see that those lease payments were in line, and they think that they are. I'm hesitant to give the name of the real estate company, but they got comparables, is how it was done, and offered that. So there's some research that's been done on the recommendation for it.
Do we have that before us?
I have it. We have to get that for it.
Okay, because have their lease payments been timely?
Yes, I have.
Okay. My only issue without that information is these payments were originally set in 2007 with a set escalator for the economic conditions at that time. And so it would be peculiar, since our economic conditions, particularly in downtown, have changed so much in terms of space and capacity, that those would be currently in mind. But they may be.
thank you, Steve.
I just want to say, I think since this lease was initially done, Sirius Radio merged with XM. And I think, am I correct, that Nashville is now the headquarters for both of the satellite providers, radio providers, Sirius and XM? Am I correct?
Well, they have a corporate headquarters someplace else, but this is one of two. Times Square is the other, and we think that the rate that they're paying is more than competitive. They asked for us to adjust it down. We said we'd go with the higher rate that was a benefit to the sports authority. We can certainly research that. But it is one of two outstanding radio locations that they've got, seeing the others in Times Square.
I'm sure that our rates are lower than Times Square.
But that's just a corporate headquarters.
So what are we here? Like a studio or?
It's a full studio with a world outreach. They have announcers that are local that are available so that if one of the headliners or for the announcement for the Predators edition of the staff, they'll bring that individual into the studio on the second floor and broadcast that throughout their satellite nation. So it is a fully functioning studio with additional support staff, office space.
So some of their programming comes out of Washington, some of it out of Times Square, and some of it out of here. Is that okay? All right.
One quick question, Emmett and Terry both. Other than the escalator and the change in the rents, are there any other substantive changes in the lease agreement compared to what we've had last time?
That's not requested.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, I'll be pleased to move adoption.
Okay. Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Approved? Okay, abstained, okay. Okay, this concludes our agenda. I believe, Emmett, did we miss anything on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, other than one item that we placed in your packet, Margaret and I have had discussions about the Predator and Powers Management lease discussions and Lauren's input to them. We've added a page that's in your packet behind tab 7 that is an incentive fee calculation, just so you'll have that there, is kind of a way of looking at the discussions that are taking place. You realize that it's a very complicated formula, but there are the highlights there that are certified numbers on what the Sports Authority approved through the incentive fee payment structure with Powers Management for their receiving incentive fees. So I just want to point that out, that it's a handy guide for you behind that set.
Okay, appreciate all of you being here and staying for the meeting throughout. We are now adjourned. Thank you.
Amen.
I need-